Super is projected to be one of the largest pension markets globally by 2030, and we're seeing a rising trend of retirees being much more frugal than they perhaps need to be, and consequently dying with outstanding balances. What measures can we use to calculate how much we need to save for retirement?
Well, Sim, I think there's two different ways we can look at this. So we'll get into spending, and that is important, but also we need to look at the savings side. So right now, the super guarantee is 11.5%. So it goes up to 12% on July 1st. And really, we need to make a number of assumptions. And we always encourage people to have a plan that, of course, involves these assumptions around saving and spending in retirement. And a couple of them that I looked at was, number one, what you are trying to replace in terms of your income in retirement. So generally, the rule of thumb is around 70%. And basically, I modeled out how long somebody was actually going to work and looked at, does the super guarantee get people to the income replacement rate that most people want in retirement? And then when we get over to the spending side, and we also need this in the assumptions, we're really looking at withdrawal rates. So how much are you taking out of super every single year? There is a government rule basically after 65 that you have to take 5% out. But of course, retirees could take more out. They could take 5% out and not spend it all. So there's really a lot of different assumptions we're making around retirement.
And what impact do super allocations have on your ability to replace the income during retirement?
Yeah, that's a really big one. So that's the return that you earn. And if we look over the long term, as much as people like to concentrate on, or some people picking individual shares and ETFs, the real driver is your asset allocation. So at a high level, we have growth assets, where over the long term, we have higher rates of return. And then we have defensive assets where we have less volatility. They bounce around less in price, but we get less return. And so it's really important to, as part of this saving plan, is to get the correct asset allocation. And I think what a lot of people do is they'll generally default into something like a balanced fund because they think that sounds good, but they don't actually explore if that is going to get them the returns they need to hit their retirement goals.
On the topic of returns, I guess the fact is many investors don't receive these desirable returns. And what do you think some of the factors that lead to this are?
Yeah, the biggest one is poor behavior. And, I will say that people that use pre-mixed options in industry super funds, that does protect you a little bit from poor behavior. But certainly anyone with a self-managed super fund that is picking individual shares or ETFs or funds, investors typically tend to buy things at the wrong time after they've run up in price, and they typically sell things at the wrong time, so after they've already fallen. And so really there's a big body of research looking at how overtrading is the biggest risk to the returns that anyone gets. And people significantly underperform the market because they trade too much.
And onto your perspective, how much do you think we really need to save for retirement?
Yeah, so, running it through this rough scenario with lots of assumptions involved, I think it's closer to 15%. I think for most people that do want a retirement where they're able to replace 70% of their income, where they're working for 40 years, so this is not early retirement, I think it's 15%, maybe a little bit more. And certainly people that are not able to work uninterrupted without career breaks for 40 years, you would have to save even more. There's obviously lots of different assumptions that go into this, some things that are known, some things that are unknown, but really having a plan that can act as a baseline is a really good place to start so that you're not just making these decisions blindly. So come up with a plan, and then you can adjust it over time as your circumstances change. And I think building that plan, I think that can be overwhelming for some people, but the article that this interview is based on is a good place to start. There are resources in that article that can help you put together a goals-based plan, including calculators we have at Morningstar to both project portfolios, calculate the return you need, all the things you need to set up this baseline so that you can get started and be more confident in your retirement outcomes.
This video has been prepared for clients of Morningstar Australasia Pty Ltd and or New Zealand wholesale clients of Morningstar Research Ltd. Any general advice has been provided without reference to your financial objectives, situation or needs. You should consider the advice in light of these matters and any relevant product disclosure statement before making any decision to invest. To obtain advice for your own situation, contact a financial advisor.